A barn burning in the night is never silent. Wood screams as flames rip through beams that have stood proud for generations, sparks spiraling upward like embers of forgotten dreams. Tonight in Willow Valley. That fire is more than smoke and ash. It's the first shot fired in a war between legacy and greed, between lands soaked in sweat and tears, and a ruthless force determined to erase it all. For one man, watching helplessly as the fire devours his family's heritage, it's personal. For the shadowed figures who lit the blaze, it's merely business. But under these dark skies, something stronger than flames has ignited the fierce resolve of those who refuse to surrender quietly. This night marks the line drawn in the dirt, and come morning, nothing here will ever be the same. Wayne Carter woke before dawn in the same weathered farmhouse his grandfather had built, feeling the ache in his knees as he rose from a creaking wooden chair by the window. The early morning chill crept through cracks in the aging walls, and the only illumination came from the overhead bulb casting a dim circle of light. Outside, the moon hung low over the Carter fields once lush, now worn and tired from drought. Wayne was 53, recently widowed, and burdened by a debt he never imagined could loom so large. A stained envelope lay open on the table, its contents made clear the night before final warning, stamped in bold red at the top of a foreclosure notice. More than just an official threat, it felt like a sentence when his late wife, Marianne, had warned him about tough times if the rains did not return. But neither of them had anticipated the relentless onslaught of financial woes that followed. With Marianne gone, everything felt heavier: his heart, his body, even the air around him. He recalled their plans to expand the Carter farm into a place for agritourism, maybe a small cafe to attract travelers. Now, though, he could barely pay for feed and upkeep, let alone any new venture. Morning chores were Wayne's refuge, checking on the handful of cattle he had left, making sure the irrigation lines, what little water they could carry, were functioning, and monitoring rows of withered crops in a last-ditch effort to salvage a season's worth of labor. As he stepped onto the porch, he caught sight of a truck from the bank kicking up dust on the dirt road. The man who climbed out was a stranger, not local banker Henry Jasper, but a young fellow in a crisp suit who introduced himself as representing Argent Partners. With a forced smile, he handed Wayne a reminder of the past due amount. The man's too slick demeanor clashed with the Carter farm's rugged authenticity, making Wayne's gut knot in immediate distrust. The man left quickly, apparently satisfied with delivering the ominous message. As the truck disappeared, Wayne sank onto the porch bench and stared across the fields at the edge of his property. The sun was a pale gold disk just peeking over the horizon. Thoughts of turning away from the land, of selling out and escaping, gnawed at him. But he remembered the promise he had once made to his grandfather. Back when he was a wide-eyed teen, he would keep this land thriving for the next generation. Yet that promise now felt impossible, especially without Marianne by his side. Absently, he ran a calloused hand over his cheek, feeling stubble that needed shaving. In the gray morning, the world seemed a blur. Determined not to yield to despair, he hauled himself upright. At least the chores provided structure. Step by step, he fed the cattle, cleared the barn walkway, and checked the feed supply. Thoughts of the foreclosure letter hovered over him, but working with his hands offered a small reprieve. Somewhere in the middle of lifting a bale of hay, he glanced across the property line and saw a figure struggling with a collapsed section of fence on the abandoned Conway orchard next door. It had been vacant since old Clyde Conway passed, and no one had taken care of the orchard for years. Curiosity piqued. Wayne set down the hay bale. If he was honest with himself, the orchard's fallen fence was none of his business. He had his own pressing troubles, but something in him couldn't ignore the sight of a person wrestling alone with broken timber. With a sigh, he decided to walk over and see if he could help. Maybe a small act of neighborly kindness would keep the gloom at bay, if only for a moment. The woman looked out of place amidst the unkempt orchard rows. She wore clean denim jeans without a speck of dirt, a stylish work jacket, and new boots that seemed untouched by the dust of real field labor. Her hair, a warm shade of chestnut, was pulled back neatly, though a few strands had slipped free. framing her face with a frustration that was evident as she tugged at the fence post. Wayne noticed the rotted wood near the base and the sagging wire that once formed the orchard's boundary. A single look told him this entire stretch needed replacing. He'd seen enough fences in disrepair on his own land to know the job would be neither quick nor simple. Clearing his throat gently, he approached, tipping his cap in a gesture of greeting. "Looks like you're in a tussle there. Need a hand." He tried to sound casual, but worry about his own responsibilities tugged at his mind. The woman turned, startled, her eyes revealing a mix of relief and mild embarrassment. "Oh, hello. Yes, I could definitely use some help. I leaned on this post, and the whole thing just collapsed." She spoke with a calm confidence. Though Wayne couldn't place her accent, it felt more polished and less drawling than the locals. "I'm Wayne Carter," he said, extending a hand. She introduced herself as Amelia Delaney, studying the orchard as a potential investment. Wayne's eyebrows rose a fraction. Potential investment. He thought the old Conway orchard was worthless, no caretaker in years, half the trees dead or diseased. But the idea of anyone interested in reviving it stirred a faint flicker of hope. He'd grown up hearing stories about how abundant Clyde Conway's apples and peaches were once upon a time. Wayne took a closer look at the fence. "Your posts are shot," he said bluntly. "Wood's rotted through. You'll need new ones and some decent wire if you want this to hold." Amelia sighed, removing a thin pair of work gloves that seemed more suited to gardening than fence building. "I was afraid of that. I hoped I could at least prop it up for now." She glanced at the orchard behind them, rows of apple and peach trees in sore need of pruning. "There's so much to do. I barely know where to start." Despite his own urgent tasks, Wayne found himself offering to repair the fence for her, at least the worst section. Maybe it was the way she seemed genuinely lost trying to handle these tasks alone. Or perhaps it was his ingrained sense of neighborliness that his grandfather had drilled into him. Don't ever turn your back on a neighbor in need. Amelia offered to pay him, but Wayne waved her off initially, saying he had some spare fence posts lying around. The truth was, he couldn't really afford to give away anything these days. But something about her earnestness made him want to help. They worked side by side under the late morning sun, Wayne showing her how to dig new post holes and set them correctly so they wouldn't lean over time. She labored diligently, though it was clear she lacked experience. Each time Amelia asked a question, Wayne felt a small surge of satisfaction at being able to share his knowledge. Perhaps it was the novelty of teaching someone who truly wanted to listen, or perhaps it was that spark of human connection he had missed ever since Marianne's passing. By the time they had replaced a few posts and reattached some wire, both had broken a sweat, but there was a simple gratification in seeing a small task completed. When they finished, Amelia insisted on compensating Wayne, pressing some folded bills into his hand. He hesitated, but she was politely firm. The money was more than fair, and with his looming debts, refusing it outright seemed foolish. After they exchanged a few pleasantries and she thanked him again, Amelia climbed into her SUV, a practical, newer model that looked expensive, and drove off, leaving Wayne alone in the silent orchard. He rubbed his neck, pondering how surreal the day had been, a chance meeting that made him briefly forget about foreclosure. He made his way back to the Carter farm, the bills tucked into his shirt pocket. That small wad of cash felt heavier than it looked, a reminder of just how precarious his situation had become. That evening, Wayne found himself hovering in front of the old desktop computer in his living room, something he typically avoided unless he had business emails or needed to order feed supplies. But the puzzle of Amelia Delaney nagged at him. The orchard was in sad shape. Why would anyone see it as a lucrative investment? And how did she have the know-how or capital to even attempt such a project? He typed her name into a search engine, not expecting much, but was quickly surprised to find numerous articles and news pieces about Delaney Agricultural Solutions, a company pioneering sustainable methods and cooperative farming models in several Midwestern states. At first glance, the firm's mission statement sounded almost too idealistic: protect family-owned farms, maintain healthy soil, share technology and resources. Yet it aligned curiously with the fleeting sense of respect he'd felt when working beside Amelia. Reading on, he discovered that Amelia's company had stepped into distressed rural areas before, offering partnerships to struggling farmers. Testimonials from farmers out in Iowa praised Delaney Agricultural for preserving land ownership while providing modern equipment, better distribution channels, and training. Some mentioned Amelia Delaney's hands-on approach as vital to their success. Skepticism still gnawed at Wayne. He had seen helpful ag companies before that turned around and strong-armed farmers into one-sided contracts. But if these stories were true, there was a chance Amelia's intentions were genuine. His late-night research was interrupted by a knock at the door. He opened it to find Sam Wilkins, a longtime friend and neighbor, leaning against the frame. Sam's brow was furrowed, and he quickly explained his concern earlier that day. A representative from a large agri-corporate entity called Argent Partners showed up, urging Sam to sell. They'd mentioned they were collecting properties in the area, citing the valley's decline as the perfect moment to buy low. According to Sam, the man from Argent showed a special interest in the Carter farm too, remarking that Wayne's debt was a prime example of why it was time to move on. Sam had refused to sign anything, but the threat lingered. Argent had resources, big pockets, and a reputation for swallowing up land. Wayne felt a chill run down his spine, so that slick agent who came with the foreclosure notice earlier was no small fry. Argent might be orchestrating a mass buyout, waiting for farmers to default so they could swoop in. The notion made Wayne's stomach knot with anger. This land was more than acreage in value. This was his family legacy. Sam's visit ended with a handshake and a grim mutual understanding. Times were about to get worse, and they needed to be prepared. Returning to the computer, Wayne searched Argent Partners' farmland acquisitions. Countless horror stories emerged, small towns decimated, local economies folded into a corporate structure, families forced off ancestral land. He read about lawsuits claiming illegal intimidation tactics. Though results were inconclusive, the feeling of being cornered closed around him. With a final, exasperated sigh, he shut down the computer. In just 24 hours, the Carter farm had gone from a personal crisis to a potential battleground in a larger corporate war. Sleep was hard to come by that night, even with exhaustion pulling him down. Wayne's mind raced with images of dusty auction blocks, big men in suits driving him off his property, and a silent orchard next door that might hold more answers than he realized. The next day, as Wayne fed the few remaining cattle before sunrise, headlights pierced the early morning gloom. A familiar SUV pulled up by the barn. He wiped his brow and walked over to greet Amelia Delaney, who stepped out carrying a thermos and a paper bag. She offered him a friendly smile, apologizing if she'd come too early. "I brought coffee and some fresh pastries," she explained. "Figured you might need a real breakfast after yesterday's work." Her thoughtfulness caught Wayne off guard. He wasn't used to visitors bringing him anything besides warnings or bills. They settled on a couple of old hay bales near the barn, sipping coffee as the eastern sky slowly brightened. For a moment, the scene felt peaceful, reminiscent of earlier days when Mary Ann would bring him a thermos of hot tea while he worked. Amelia began asking about his farm, how many acres he still cultivated, how the drought had affected his yields, and whether he had ever considered organic methods. He spoke hesitantly, unsure if she was probing for business reasons or genuine curiosity. She soon revealed the nature of her visit. "Wayne," she said, voice calm but determined, "I'm planning to buy the old Conway orchard, but I don't want to stop there. My company specializes in forming cooperative farming networks. We help small landowners keep their farms, transition to sustainable practices, and improve profitability by sharing resources and distribution." She paused and letting the idea sink in. "If I'm going to rehabilitate the orchard, I'll need local allies. People like you, who know this land's quirks and strengths." Wayne studied Amelia's face. He saw sincerity in her green eyes, but remembered the corporate shenanigans he'd read about. "What's in it for your company?" he asked bluntly. Refusing to dance around the point, Amelia didn't flinch. She explained that while Delaney Agricultural Solutions did earn a profit, The primary goal was to empower small farmers to become more resilient. Cooperatives meant pooling resources, rotating crops intelligently, and securing better prices on equipment and seeds. In turn, Delaney Ag gained a stable supply of quality produce to meet growing market demand for sustainably sourced food. At first, the pitch echoed the stories Wayne had read online, but hearing her speak those words face to face gave them more weight. She was offering him a lifeline, yet it was one that demanded trust. "I'm not sure I can trust big-sounding promises," he admitted, revealing a hint of the cynicism that had crept into his soul after countless financial blows. Amelia gently handed him a folder. Inside were references, farmers in neighboring states, phone numbers, accounts from real people who had partnered with her company. "Call them," she urged. "Ask whatever you want. No strings attached." Before Wayne could respond, a black sedan rumbled up his driveway, interrupting the moment. Out stepped Franklin Sinclair, a stern-faced representative of Argent Partners. The tension around him was almost palpable. He barely acknowledged Amelia's presence, instead focusing on Wayne. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, "I've come to discuss a new offer, one that might clear your debts outright, give you a significant payout, and free you from, well, all of this." He gestured at the farm buildings behind them. His tone suggested that Wayne's life was something to escape rather than cherish. Amelia stood by, arms crossed, obviously displeased by Sinclair's arrival. For Wayne, it was as if the lines had been drawn in the dirt. He could practically feel the dust swirl around them, setting the stage for a confrontation that would determine the Carter farm's fate. Franklin Sinclair wasted no time. Flipping open a sleek binder, he produced documents that spelled out Argent's intentions in stark terms: a complete buyout of Carter Farm at a price that, on paper, seemed remarkably generous, far above its current market valuation. "We understand your financial position," Sinclair said, glancing toward Wayne's dilapidated barn. "And we believe your best move is to liquidate now before the bank proceeds with foreclosure. Argent Partners is offering you a fresh start." His voice was carefully modulated, as though he had rehearsed this speech many times. Wayne's chest tightened. The figure was large enough to settle all his debts, maybe even leave him with enough money to relocate. But the cost was his family's heritage, the land his grandfather had coaxed into productivity through grit and determination. Before Wayne could gather his thoughts, Amelia stepped forward. "That's quite a sum," she said, voice measured. "But what happens if Wayne wants to stay on and manage the place?" Sinclair's thin smile made it clear he considered that notion ludicrous. "Management positions can be arranged," he replied. "Though once Argent takes control, we typically consolidate operations. We bring in corporate efficiency experts. Farming is a business, after all, and personal attachments often complicate things." The words "personal attachments" struck Wayne like a blow. How could Sinclair stand there and dismiss a lifetime of love and labor as if it were an outdated trinket? Amelia looked at Wayne, silently urging him to respond, but Sinclair continued as if he hadn't noticed. "Of course, Mr. Carter. You should take your time, though, not too long. These opportunities don't last indefinitely." Amelia cleared her throat, addressing Sinclair directly. "I'm Amelia Delaney, CEO of Delaney Agricultural Solutions. We're also in the process of investing here, specifically the Conway Orchard next door. Wayne's farm would be integral to a cooperative model that benefits everyone in this valley." She laid out a brief summary of her approach: shared equipment, fair distribution channels, maintaining local ownership. Sinclair listened with a polite but dismissive look. "That's admirable," he remarked, "but also unsustainably sentimental. The market demands scale and consolidation. That's what we provide. Old-fashioned notions of community farmland won't survive the next decade." Wayne felt anger flash through him, but as his eyes drifted to the battered porch steps and the rundown farm equipment, he was reminded of how truly cornered he was. He didn't have the luxury of moral outrage alone. He needed real solutions. I need time," he said finally, voice gruff with emotion. "I'll consider both offers. I'll speak to the bank as well." Sinclair nodded tersely, snapping his binder shut. "I'll be in touch," he promised, heading back to his car with swift steps, as though he'd merely closed another deal. In the quiet that followed, Amelia reached out and placed a hand lightly on Wayne's arm. I meant what I said about calling those references. She reminded him, and if you want to see what we've done in other states, I can arrange that. Wayne nodded, his throat felt tight. The swirl of possible futures was overwhelming on one hand, financial security, but complete loss of autonomy. On the other, a collaborative model that risked falling apart if not enough neighbors joined. Still, Amelia was the first person to talk about saving his land, rather than profiting from its ruin. That counted for something. Let's talk more, he finally murmured. But right now, I need to see a man about alone. He walked her to her SUV in tense silence, emotions in turmoil. She offered a smile as she left, as if to say she understood the weight of his predicament. Wayne stood in the driveway, staring at the rising sun. The day had barely begun, and already he felt as though he'd lived a week's worth of conflict. Inside his house, that foreclosure letter still sat on the table, daring him to find a way forward. After lunch, Wayne drove into the nearby town of Willow Creek. Its single main street, once bustling, now felt subdued. Half the storefronts were closed or hollowed out, victims of the region's years-long downturn. He parked outside the modest brick bank building, once a pillar of hope in better times, and stepped in to see if Henry Jasper, the local banker he trusted, was available. Instead, he was met by a receptionist who regretfully informed him that Mr. Jasper had taken early retirement. In his place was a younger loan officer from Argent Partners on temporary assignment, as she called it. Disheartened, Wayne insisted on meeting with someone in management, eventually getting escorted to a cramped office where a stern-faced woman introduced herself as Clara Hughes, the new interim manager. Before he could fully explain his predicament, she interjected, "Mr. Carter, we're aware of your farm's foreclosure timeline. Unless you pay the delinquent amount or refinance, both of which require capital, you currently lack. There's little we can do but proceed." Her tone held no warmth, no sympathy. Wayne pressed on. "I've had interest from multiple parties, Argent. Yes, but also Delaney Agricultural Solutions. I'm exploring a cooperative model that might revitalize the farm." Clara's expression flickered slightly at the mention of Delaney, but she kept her posture rigid. "With all due respect, Mr. Carter, Delaney's proposed offering is significantly lower than Argent's direct purchase plan. Our duty is to recover as much as we can, to satisfy your outstanding loan." That line of corporate speak strangled Wayne's optimism. He tried to remind Clara of the bank's long-standing ties to local farms, how families like the Carters had banked here for generations. But she brushed aside history, focusing on current fiscal realities. Wayne had rarely felt so powerless. He left the bank with the knowledge that time was not on his side, and that Argent wielded far more influence than he'd ever imagined. Determined not to sink into despair, Wayne stopped on by the local library, one of the few community fixtures still active. There, he used a public computer to open a directory of contacts from Amelia's folder. Cupping his cell phone, he stepped outside to make calls. One farmer in Kansas described how Delaney Ag had installed new water conservation measures at no upfront cost, allowing him to save his corn crop during a drought. Another from Minnesota praised Amelia for negotiating better prices with retailers, boosting profit margins for small dairy farms. These voices shared a common thread. Delaney's approach wasn't about a quick buyout, but a sustainable partnership, preserving land and heritage. Wayne hung up, strangely moved. For the first time in months, he felt a kernel of hope. Yet that hope was overshadowed by the looming threat that Argent posed. As he headed back to the Carter farm, he noticed Sam Wilkins's truck parked alongside the road. Sam flagged him down, eyes wide. "Wayne," he said breathlessly, "I think someone tampered with my irrigation system last night. Half my lines are cut, and I've found footprint I don't recognize." His voice shook with anger and unease. Instantly, Wayne thought of the intimidation stories he'd read. Argent, or whoever they hired locally, seemed willing to push. Wayne gritted his teeth. "I'll come help you see what's what," he said, feeling a churn of fear and fury. If they were cutting Sam's lines now, it could be Wayne's fence or barn next. Tension mounted like a heavy storm cloud on the horizon. The fight for his farm and for the entire valley wasn't just about numbers on a ledger anymore. The sabotage on Sam Wilkins' land proved more sinister than Wayne first suspected. When they arrived at Sam's fields, they found freshly cut irrigation lines and footprints scuffing the soil, two sets of them. Torn hoses, once critical for carrying precious water, now lay in tangled piles. Sam explained how he discovered the damage at dawn. It's not accidental. Wayne, this is deliberate. The sick feeling in Wayne's stomach deepened. They spent the afternoon patching hoses and relaying lines. The scorching sun baked the clay-rich soil, making the labor exhausting. Yet more than physical strain, it was the mental weight that pressed on them. Sam's fear was evident. I have a family, he muttered. I can't afford big repairs. If I lose this crop, I'm done for. Wayne recognized the desperation in Sam's voice. He'd felt it himself countless times in the past few weeks. Then came a call on Sam's cell phone. It was from an unknown number, but Sam answered on speaker. A man's voice, chilling in its casual cruelty, said something about our generous offer still stands. Sam bristled, shouting back, but the man simply ended the call. Wayne clenched his fists, anger pulsing in his chest. This was no random act. It was intimidation, pure and simple. That evening, Wayne went back to Carter Farm restless. He walked his property lines as dusk settled, scanning for signs of tampering. His barn stood at the far corner of the acreage, silent against the gloaming sky. He recalled how he and Marianne had once stored boxes of dried wildflower seeds there, planning to sow them across the field as a homage to her mother. Those plans had evaporated with the drought and their mounting debts, but the memory clung to him like a ghost. Inside the barn, he checked his tool bench, found nothing out of place. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the next attack might be aimed at him. With trembling fingers, he tested the lock on the barn door, ensuring it was secure. In the dim interior, his eyes landed on a row of old family photos pinned to a dusty corkboard, grainy pictures of Carter men and women, smiling in front of bountiful harvests from decades past. He swore softly. He was tired of seeing his inheritance, his life's work, threatened by a faceless corporate machine. That night, Wayne placed a call to Amelia. His nerves jangled with every ring until she picked up. He told her about the irrigation sabotage, about how Sam had been threatened. Amelia's voice grew tense, but not surprised. We've encountered these tactics before, she said quietly. Argent denies involvement, but we've seen the pattern. Wayne does them. This is exactly why we try to offer farmers an alternative strength in numbers, rather than standing alone. A silence passed before Wayne finally said, I'm leaning in your direction, but I need more than words. If I stand up to Argent and it goes badly, I lose everything. Amelia promised to bring in a consultant from her team who specialized in security issues. She also mentioned a meeting she wanted to hold with local farmers at the old diner in Willow Creek to discuss forming a cooperative alliance. If we can gather enough support, Argent won't be able to bully us individually, she said. The call ended, leaving Wayne feeling simultaneously apprehensive and oddly comforted. Perhaps a flicker of hope still burned amidst the gloom. Daybreak arrived with a startling event, an orange glow against the pre-dawn sky near Wayne's barn. He tore out of the house in boots hastily shoved onto bare feet, heart pounding as he realized flames were licking the barn's northern wall. Racing to his truck, he fumbled for a fire extinguisher he kept for emergencies, but the blaze was already too big. He dialed the local volunteer fire department, breath ragged. Within minutes, though, it felt like hours, firefighters arrived, dousing the structure. Neighbors, alerted by the smoke, drove up with buckets of water and wet blankets. In the aftermath, Wayne surveyed the damage. The barn's northern wall was scorched black, beams still smoldering. A portion of the roof had caved in. The volunteer fire chief approached grimly. We found traces of accelerant, she said softly. Looks like someone wanted to make sure it caught fast. Wayne's fists clenched. This was no random accident. Sam Wilkins and a few other locals, including a stern-faced older rancher named Bill Thompson, approached to offer condolences. The talk quickly shifted to suspicion. Argent is behind this. Bill spat, voice trembling with anger. They want to scare us into selling. Wayne nodded again, though part of him still hoped it was just some sick prank, yet the pattern was too strong to ignore. That afternoon, when Wayne's phone rang, he half expected it to be another threat. Instead, it was Amelia, who had heard the news. She arrived an hour later in a pickup truck, accompanied by a security specialist from her company. They assessed the damage, took photos of the barn's charred timbers, and recorded statements from neighbors who saw suspicious lights before the fire started. For the first time, Wayne felt he wasn't fighting this alone. Amelia's presence was a steadying force. Neighbors trickled in, bearing gestures of support tools, extra lumber, even homemade meals. In their worried faces, Wayne saw a reflection of the community's vulnerability. They were good, hardworking people who had withstood storms and droughts. But this brand of targeted intimidation was new. Bill Thompson shook Wayne's hand and muttered, "If we don't stand together now, we'll all be smoked out, one by one." As evening fell, Wayne and Amelia prepared for the meeting at the Willow Creek Diner, an urgent gathering she had arranged with about a dozen local farmers. Before leaving, Wayne gently touched a charred beam of the barn, feeling its warmth dissipate. Beneath his anger and fear, determination simmered. If Argent thought to break his spirit by burning a piece of his legacy, they had miscalculated. He would rebuild, even if it meant fighting tooth and nail. Beside him, Amelia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry this happened," she said quietly. "We'll do everything we can to protect what's left, and we'll make sure they pay for it, in the only currency they understand: community resolve." Wayne nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The flames had destroyed an integral part of his family's story, but it had also lit a spark of defiance in him. A small spark that grew with each passing second, fueled by righteous anger and the faint but persistent hope that better days could still lie ahead, if only they stood united. The Willow Creek Diner was an old establishment with faded red booths and a checkered linoleum floor that had seen countless footsteps over the decades. Normally quiet, it hummed that evening with the tense energy of a small crowd. A dozen local farmers, ranchers, and their spouses gathered, each bearing worried expressions. Wayne and Amelia entered, met by murmured greetings and uneasy smiles. Sam Wilkins, still rattled by the sabotage on his irrigation lines, stood with arms folded. Bill Thompson sipped coffee in a corner booth, eyeing the entrance warily every time the bell chimed. Amelia took a seat at the front of the diner, motioning for people to gather around. Once they quieted down, she introduced herself formally. "I'm Amelia Delaney, CEO of Delaney Agricultural Solutions. My company is working on a cooperative model that's kept hundreds of small farms from going under. We want to bring that model here to Willow Valley. But we need your support, your trust to stand against Argent's aggression." Her voice was steady, exuding both professionalism and a genuine plea for solidarity. She laid out the basics of the cooperative: a shared pool of equipment, a centralized distribution system for produce, and integrated marketing. "If enough of you join, we can negotiate collectively for seed, fertilizer, and even insurance. We'll also apply for grants that favor sustainable farming." She continued, "The orchard I'm purchasing, Conway Orchard, would serve as our processing hub and demonstration farm." Then she paused, glanced at Wayne, and added, "Wayne Carter here, he has already experienced how far Argent is willing to go. They tried to burn him out. Do we want that to be the fate of every family farm in this valley?" A hush fell. Some looked to Wayne, while remembering the barn fire. Others stared at the floor. Finally, like a guy, Sam Wilkins cleared his throat. "I can't deny that their intimidation is real. They destroyed my irrigation lines. I'm leaning toward joining Amelia's initiative because if we don't unite, we'll all be picked off. But what's it cost us? We share our profits, our decision-making power." Amelia nodded, as if expecting the question. "We design cooperative terms together. Typically, Delaney Ag takes a percentage of profits to cover overhead and reinvest in technology or infrastructure for the group. But land ownership stays with you. We're not buying you out, we're helping you modernize and sustain your farms. She handed out pamphlets with more detailed breakdowns. Another farmer, Marta Ruiz, asked if they'd have to convert to organic. Amelia explained that while organic was ideal, it wasn't mandatory. They'd strive for sustainable methods that reduce chemical reliance gradually, depending on each farm's constraints. The conversation grew animated, with nearly everyone chiming in. Some concerns were about short-term costs, others about the risk of cooperating with a big outside firm. But as they spoke, the overarching theme was fear. Fear of Argent's heavy-handed tactics, fear of losing generational land, fear of being left with nothing. Wayne observed quietly, moved by the raw emotions swirling through the group. Yes, there were doubts about Amelia, but the barn fire had shaken them all. Bill Thompson eventually stood up, voice gravelly. I'm old enough to remember when neighbors helped each other build a barn or harvest a crop without question. Maybe this cooperative is just a modern version of that old neighborly spirit. I, for one, am willing to try. His words settled over them, forging a path forward. After a show of hands, Amelia had enough initial support to proceed. She promised to draw up partnership drafts to review within a week. The meeting concluded on a cautious but hopeful note, as if they had forged a fragile alliance in the face of an encroaching storm. While the diner meeting marked an important shift, a new wave of pressure from Argent arrived within days. Farmers who had shown interest in Amelia's cooperative were visited by Argent representatives promising better deals, cash offers so high they seemed absurd. Sam Wilkins received phone calls at odd hours warning him that refusing Argent's money would cost him dearly. Meanwhile, Bill Thompson woke one morning to find an ominous note nailed to his fence, simply reading, "Time's up." News of these incidents spread like wildfire across Willow Valley, leaving the community more anxious than ever. Wayne, still smarting from the barn fire, refused to let fear dictate his next move. He spent long days helping neighbors repair damage, checking fences, and quietly coordinating with Amelia's security consultant, who documented every instance of sabotage. At night, Wayne pored over cooperative agreements Amelia provided, scanning the fine print, searching for hidden traps. But each time he found only fair terms: joint ownership of equipment, collective bargaining for supplies, and a modest profit-sharing structure that protected land rights. Despite the tension, Amelia continued work on the Conway orchard. She hired a local crew to begin repairs on the dilapidated orchard house and barns. New irrigation piping arrived, along with horticultural experts who assessed the aging fruit trees. Wayne visited the orchard occasionally, impressed by the flurry of activity and the calm, methodical way Amelia oversaw each stage. Standing beside a row of half-dead apple trees, she confided in him how she planned to revitalize them through pruning, grafting, and improved soil management. "It'll take a couple of seasons," she explained, "but these trees still have life in them, just like this whole valley." One afternoon, Wayne found Amelia alone in the orchard's aging farmhouse, scanning through yellowed property records. She looked up, a serious glint in her eyes. "Did you know the Conways and the Carters once co-owned a huge swath of this valley?" she asked. Wayne frowned. He vaguely recalled family lore about a shared boundary, a handshake agreement that split the orchard from the farmland. "It goes deeper than that," Amelia continued. "I found documents showing that your grandfather and mine were actually brothers-in-law. They had a falling out decades ago over how to develop the land. One believed in smaller, family-owned plots. The other wanted commercial expansion." The revelation struck Wayne like a jolt. Family. It felt surreal, as if the orchard he'd known all his life was more intimately tied to the Carter farm than he'd ever imagined. Amelia seemed equally moved. "I always wondered why my grandparents spoke so passionately about the farmland here. They wanted to return someday, but life took them elsewhere." She softly closed the ledger and inhaled, as though mustering courage. "I won't let Argent or anyone else destroy this place, not when our family's legacies are written into these fields." Just as the moment of shared discovery hung between them, Wayne's phone chimed a text from Sam, "Meeting at Town Hall. Now, it read, no explanation given. Wayne showed Amelia. She nodded, lips pressed tight. Something was brewing. They locked the farmhouse and drove off together, hearts pounding with the sense that events were coming to a critical head. The orchard, their families' intertwined histories, even the fate of Willow Valley itself, all of it hinged on what they could accomplish in the face of Argent's unrelenting pressure. The town hall meeting room was more crowded than Wayne had ever seen it, with anxious faces packed shoulder to shoulder. Some farmers stood at the back, leaning against walls, arms folded. A half-dozen Argent representatives led by Franklin Sinclair had taken seats at the front, forming a formidable line in dark suits. On the other side, Amelia, Wayne, and a handful of local supporters tried to keep a calm demeanor. The mayor, a harried-looking woman named Trisha Byrne, stepped to the podium and tapped the microphone for quiet. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice shaky but resolute. "We've had multiple complaints of vandalism and intimidation. We've also received official proposals for large-scale agricultural development, both from Argent Partners and Delaney Agricultural Solutions." She paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "Given the spike in tensions, the council and I have decided to hold this open forum so both sides can present their visions for Willow Valley's future." Franklin Sinclair rose first, impeccably dressed, the epitome of corporate efficiency. He spoke in polished tones, describing Argent's plan to modernize farmland, consolidate resources, and introduce cutting-edge technology. Over the murmurs, he breezed through slides on a projector that displayed large yields, precise irrigation systems, and smiling corporate employees. "Our investment guarantees immediate financial relief for distressed landowners," Sinclair emphasized, "and a bright future for those who choose to remain in a management capacity." He neatly sidestepped allegations of sabotage, calling them unproven rumors. When Amelia stood, the tension heightened. Her presentation was simpler, focusing on how cooperative agriculture had worked in other regions, the testimonials of farmers who thrived under Delaney's model, and the ethical commitment to keeping land in the hands of families who had farmed it for generations. Instead of slick charts, she showed photos of actual fields, barns, and families from Iowa, Nebraska, and beyond. "We believe in building from the roots up," she said, "not replacing local tradition with faceless corporations." Wayne listened, heart pounding, noticing how some locals nodded at Amelia's words while others seemed swayed by Sinclair's promises of quick wealth. The floor opened to questions and heated exchanges erupted. One farmer complained about hefty membership fees in cooperatives, which Amelia clarified were reinvested in shared equipment and marketing. Another challenged Argent's track record on water usage, citing environmental violations. Sinclair deflected by praising corporate oversight and advanced irrigation. Then Bill Thompson, a quiet presence at the back, raised a trembling hand. "My father built our ranch from scratch after the war," he said softly, voice cracking with emotion. "I'm in debt right now, sure, but the thought of turning it all over to strangers who burned Wayne's barn, no, I don't want that. I want a way to hold on, to pass something down. If Ms. Delaney can offer that, I'll stand with her." The room buzzed with rising tension. Sinclair tried to interject, claiming Argent had no motive for arson. A few of his associates smirked. Wayne felt a surge of anger. Before he realized it, he was on his feet, speaking without a microphone. He described the barn that had stood for 3 generations, the sabotage to Sam's fields, and the threatening calls. "I'm not leaving this land," he declared. "I don't care how fat the check is." His declaration rippled through the crowd, drawing applause from some and skeptical whispers from others. But the emotional impact was clear. People were tired of bullying. By the end of the night, the mayor concluded that the council would deliberate on any zoning changes Argent required. She encouraged community members to come forward with evidence of wrongdoing. Even though no final decisions were made, a sense of momentum tilted in Amelia's favor. Sinclair stalked out, jaw clenched, leaving a final remark that business always finds a way. Wayne locked eyes with Amelia. He could practically feel the room buzzing with raw energy. Their fight wasn't over, but the lines were now unmistakably drawn. Hopes rose in the following days as more farmers tentatively signed letters of intent to join Amelia's cooperative. But Argent escalated its tactics. Rumors spread that the corporation was fast-tracking a lawsuit to force early foreclosure on Wayne's farm. Sam Wilkins reported an unmarked black SUV scoping out his property late at night. Even Bill Thompson got a surprise bank notice claiming minor loan infractions, courtesy of newly discovered paperwork errors. Each development felt like a fresh assault, designed to erode morale and sow doubt. In response, Amelia's team scrambled to protect the growing alliance. The security consultant documented every suspicious act, preparing a case to present to both the local authorities and, if necessary, higher legal authorities. Meanwhile, Amelia herself was finalizing the purchase of the Conway orchard, a closing date set for the following week. If she could solidify ownership, she intended to transform it into the official hub of the new cooperative, a place where farmers could collectively process and distribute produce, and also a symbol of defiance against Argent's intimidation campaign. Wayne helped by reaching out to older farmers who hadn't yet come around. Some were enticed by Argent's offers, wanting an easy retirement. Others distrusted big corporations no matter the brand. But there was a sense that if the orchard revitalization showed tangible results, more locals would come aboard. He promised them progress, inviting them to come see the orchard's revamp once the sale was final. Then, a critical blow landed. Franklin Sinclair delivered an official document to Wayne, courtesy of Argent's attorneys, stating they had purchased his debt from the bank. Now, instead of owing the local institution, Wayne owed Argent partners. They demanded either immediate payment in full or surrender of the deed. Wayne's heart sank, reading each cold line. The sum was enormous. He had no way to pay it outright. Standing on his porch with that letter in his trembling hands, he couldn't breathe. For a moment, the world spun as he thought about Mary Ann, about her dream of passing the farm to future Carters. He called Amelia right away, voice shaky. She rushed over, studying the letter with grim eyes. "They're trying to corner you," she said, "hoping you'll break and sell before the orchard sale finalizes." Wayne felt heat bloom behind his eyes, a mixture of rage and hopelessness. "What can I do? This is black and white legalese. They own my debt." Amelia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Let me talk to our legal counsel. There may be ways to stall them, or we can settle your debt as part of our cooperative arrangement." Wayne looked at her, heart pounding. That might solve the immediate crisis, but it also meant becoming financially intertwined with Delaney Ang. "I don't want to be a charity case," he muttered, though desperation gnawed at him. "You wouldn't be," Amelia replied gently. "We'd structure it as an advance against your future proceeds in the cooperative. You retain ownership. We just help you pay off Argent so they lose leverage." It was a stunning lifeline. Yet the notion of letting someone else pay his debt, even in a structured deal, conflicted with Wayne's pride. Still, as Amelia explained how it could work, he realized there might be no other choice. If he refused, Argent might foreclose within days. Eyes stinging, he nodded slowly, acknowledging he needed her help. "Let's do it," he said, voice hollow. "Let's do whatever it takes to keep this land from falling into Sinclair's hands." The following morning, Wayne rode with Amelia to the local bank. Their mission was clear. They needed to finalize a cooperative financing agreement that would let Delaney Agricultural Solutions settle Wayne's debt immediately. In the small wood-paneled conference room, tension bristled as they awaited the bank manager. To Wayne's surprise, Franklin Sinclair also arrived, wearing a smug expression. "I'm here to finalize Carter's foreclosure," he said, pushing up the cuffs of his expensive suit. Before Wayne could retort, Amelia spoke up. "We're here to pay off his note," she said evenly. "Delaney Agricultural Solutions has the funds. We'll issue a cashier's check and take over the balance under a separate contract with Mr. Carter." She slid paperwork across the table, her manner cool, businesslike. Wayne's heart thumped. He was grateful for her composure, knowing that a single misstep could sabotage the plan. Sinclair's smugness evaporated into surprise, then morphed into anger. "That won't be possible," he snapped. "Argent Partners already owns the debt and has the right to foreclose unless Mr. Carter agrees to our buyout. The bank manager, visibly uncomfortable, cleared her throat. Actually, if Miss Delaney's check covers the full amount of Mr. Carter's debt plus any penalties, there's no legal basis to proceed with foreclosure, unless the contract with Argent states otherwise. Sensing a crack in Sinclair's armor, Amelia flipped open a binder brimming with legal references. "We've reviewed your assignment of mortgage," she continued, her voice crisp. "It contains no exclusivity clause preventing a third party from satisfying the lien. If Wayne Carter chooses to pay his debt through legitimate funding, you can't stop him." Wayne inhaled sharply, a surge of hope flooding his chest. Sinclair, however, wasn't done. "Argent has made a far better offer for the entire property," he argued, shooting Wayne an icy glare. "We're guaranteeing a stable future for the region." Amelia leaned forward, unwavering. "That's debatable. In any case, a loan payoff is within Wayne's rights." Heated arguments flew back and forth. Sinclair grew more incensed by the minute. Finally, he tried another tactic. "If Carter does this, he'll be throwing away the chance for immediate, significant cash. We both know his farm is barely profitable. This so-called cooperative is risky." Wayne found his voice, bolstered by Amelia's readiness. "I'm done letting Argent push me around," he said. "This land belongs to the Carters. I'm not giving it away to a bully." The bank manager, though clearly sympathetic to corporate interests, was bound by legal protocols. With a pained expression, she accepted Amelia's cashier's check, stamping the necessary forms to show the debt as paid in full. Sinclair stood, face flushed, and gathered his files in angry haste. "You'll regret this, Carter," he threatened. "Argent isn't finished with Willow Valley." He stormed out, leaving a tense hush in the conference room. Wayne sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the sudden relief. Amelia placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling softly. "It's not over," she warned. "But we bought time for you and the farm. Now we finalize the orchard purchase and bring more farmers on board. Show this valley there's a better way than Argent's scorched earth." Wayne nodded, tears unexpectedly prickling his eyes. For the first time in months, the crushing weight of foreclosure lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism. He owed Amelia a debt of gratitude he doubted he could ever repay, though she seemed more interested in forging something lasting than collecting favors. 2 days later, under an overcast sky that threatened rain, Amelia officially closed on the Conway orchard. She didn't celebrate with a champagne or fanfare. Instead, she and Wayne oversaw a team of contractors who rolled in with supplies to begin refurbishing the old orchard house. Rusty irrigation lines were being dismantled in preparation for modern drip systems. Horticultural experts started mapping out which sections of apple and peach trees could be saved and which required replanting. The orchard, once a mournful relic of another era, was coming alive with purposeful activity. By noon, the clouds burst, sending a drenching downpour across Willow Valley. While contractors scrambled for tarps, Wayne and Amelia stood on the orchard's porch, watching puddles form in the yard. Their clothes were soaked, but they shared a moment of joy that nature seemed to mirror their sense of renewal. For months, the valley had prayed for rain, and now it arrived as if offering a blessing on their new endeavor. After the workers headed off for a warm lunch, Wayne and Amelia sat in the orchard's musty living room. The old fireplace remained dusty from years of neglect, the walls scarred by peeling wallpaper. It was a far cry from a corporate office setting, but Amelia looked comfortable. She retrieved a small stack of aged documents from a file box. "I found more family records," she said, her voice echoing in the near-empty space. "It's amazing how intertwined our histories are. My grandfather was a Conway, your grandmother a Carter. They parted ways on how to develop the land, but I think they both wanted the same thing deep down, to see it flourish." Wayne nodded, speechless for a moment. Memories of his own grandparents' stories flooded back, how they used to talk about orchard parties in the summer, neighbors hauling fruit together. For so long, he'd thought the orchard was simply next-door property, but now it felt like a missing piece of his own lineage. "It's sad they never reconciled," he murmured, gazing at raindrops trailing down the window. If they had, maybe Willow Valley wouldn't be in this mess. A gentle silence settled until Amelia spoke again. But we can reconcile it now. Wayne, our generation has the chance to do this differently, to stand together, not apart. Argent thrives on division and desperation, but if we pool our knowledge and resources, we can outlast them. She looked at him with a determined warmth in her eyes. Wayne remembered the relief of paying off his farm debt just days ago, thanks to Amelia's financing. He owed her not just money, but a renewed sense of purpose. He cleared his throat. I spoke with Sam Wilkins today. He said, changing gears, he's ready to sign on to the cooperative once his next harvest is in. Bill Thompson, too, though he's cautious about the timeline. Others are interested, waiting to see real progress here. They're scared of Argent, but more scared of losing everything. Rain continued drumming on the roof. Amelia smiled as if the sound was music. Then let's give them progress to see. I'll bring more equipment next week. We'll hold a demonstration day, show them how the orchard can be a hub for all kinds of produce processing. Wayne grinned back. The synergy between them was palpable. Two heirs of a fractured legacy, now forging unity. The sense of standing at a cusp of transformation lifted his spirits. Even in the gloom of the orchard's worn interior, he felt a flicker of light and hope that maybe, just maybe, Willow Valley's best days were still ahead. Over the next month, the orchard steadily transformed into a thriving center of renewal, with fresh white paint on the farmhouse, newly installed irrigation lines weaving through rows of carefully pruned trees, and the hum of cooperative spirit filling the air. Wayne and Amelia worked tirelessly, side by side, to organize Demonstration Day, a public event inviting local farmers to witness how produce could be cleaned, sorted, and packaged using modern facilities without sacrificing the orchard's rustic charm. When the day arrived, bright sunshine bathed the orchard. Families and farmers from across Willow Valley converged, many of them stepping onto Conway land for the first time in years. Children ran under blossoming trees, while elders reminisced about harvests from decades past. At makeshift stations, Amelia's team showcased new sorting machines, labeling systems, and refrigeration units suitable for small farm produce. Nearby, Sam Wilkins offered a taste of his fresh tomatoes, proudly pointing to how improved water management had boosted their quality. Bill Thompson demonstrated how a community-shared tractor could help him bale hay more efficiently. Wayne stood beside Amelia near the orchard's refurbished barn, greeting visitors with a mixture of pride and relief. Cooperative membership forms lay on a table, and more than a dozen new signups arrived within the first hour alone. The atmosphere radiated optimism, a collective sense that Willow Valley wasn't beaten. They were building something together that could stand against a giant like Argent. Midway through the event, Franklin Sinclair showed up, flanked by two colleagues. He surveyed the bustling scene with thinly veiled disdain. "I see you're throwing a little party," he said, voice pitched loud enough to attract onlookers. But celebrations can end abruptly when money dries up. His gaze flicked to Wayne, then to Amelia. "Argent is still expanding in this area. Don't think you've seen the last of us." Amelia stood her ground, calm and dignified. "Willow Valley isn't for sale," she said. A few farmers, hearing her words, gathered behind her. Sam Wilkins glared at Sinclair, arms crossed over his chest. The unspoken show of solidarity was enough to make Sinclair pause. His expression soured further, and with a snort, he turned and marched away. As the day wound down, Wayne found himself under a large apple tree, watching neighbors chat and children laughing. In that serene moment, he remembered the barn fire's embers glowing in the night, the sabotage on Sam's fields, and the heartbreak he'd felt clutching the foreclosure notice. They hadn't vanquished Argent entirely, but they had forged a resilient foundation. He thought of Marianne, of how proud she would be to see the Carter farm not just surviving, but uniting the community. Amelia joined him under the tree. "We've got over 20 formal commitments for the cooperative now," she said, her eyes shining. That's nearly half the farmland in Willow Valley. With that scale, We can negotiate better prices for seeds, get state grants for water conservation, and truly compete. Wayne nodded, a lump in his throat. He realized that her success was also his success. Their stories intertwined not just by family history, but by a shared vision. We've come a long way, he managed to say, voice thick with emotion. Amelia gently took his hand. Yes, she agreed, and we have a long way to go. But at least we're going together. As the sun dipped low, painting the orchard in soft gold, Wayne felt an unburdened contentment he hadn't experienced in years. The orchard was alive again, its fences repaired, its trees tended, its farmhouse bustling with possibilities. The Carter farm was safe from immediate threat, anchored by the cooperative strength. And while the future remained uncertain, they now faced it arm in arm, trusting that unity and determination would be enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. In that moment, with the land's rich soil underfoot and the promise of new beginnings in the air, Wayne Carter could finally breathe free, knowing that love for the land, for its history and people, had triumphed over fear. The orchard's blossoms, the distant hum of tractors, and the laughter of neighbors merged into a gentle symphony of hope. Echoing a promise he once made to his grandfather, this land will endure, so long as good folks stand together to protect it. When the dust finally settled over Willow Valley, the scars were deeper than the charred earth or splintered fences. The valley had lost innocence, replaced by a harder, tempered truth. Farmers who once trusted easily now kept cautious watch over their fields. Yet something far stronger had taken root: resilience. Bonds forged by fire and hardship had united them, reminding each soul of what it meant to truly belong not to the land, but to each other. The cost had been heavy, the barns burned, the land bruised, dreams nearly broken, but what they gained was immeasurable. Hope, reborn from ashes, pride, sharpened by struggle, and an unspoken promise that echoed softly through every sunrise that followed. As the valley slowly healed, the winds whispered gently through crops restored, barns rebuilt, and fences mended stronger than before. But as twilight painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold, one quiet truth lingered: battles for the land might end, but the fight to protect what matters most never truly does. And now, as you watch the sun set over your own valley, your own battles fresh or distant, I wonder, when tested by fire, who or what would you fight to protect